I believed I had the perfect marriage. For 25 years, Carlos and I built a life in the quiet town of Maplewood. Our 3 children grew up amid Sunday lunches and family celebrations. I devoted myself entirely to being a wife and mother, while he built his career as an engineer. At 55, I thought I had lived through all the surprises life could throw at me. How wrong I was. That message on his phone would change everything, revealing that my fairy tale was just a sweet illusion. My world collapsed in that simple moment. While checking a mundane message on Carlos's phone, my eyes caught something I never expected. Passionate words from Julia, the woman who now occupied my husband's dreams. Each word was a dagger, each line a silent earthquake destroying my reality, built over decades of dedication. The betrayal wasn't just an act, it was a definitive sentence to my marriage. I felt my body freeze, my breath fail. Ironically, that technological device that had always been close would reveal the greatest secret that would change my existence forever. The pain exploded inside me like a silent grenade. Every cell in my body screamed in agony that no words could translate. My mind spun in a whirlwind of images, memories that once seemed so solid shattering like pieces of glass. Like an involuntary actress in a cruel play, I kept my expression frozen. I didn't want my children to notice the emotional earthquake that consumed me inside. How many years did I pretend to be happy when I wasn't? How many times did I smile at family gatherings while hiding my true anguish? Carlos's betrayal wasn't just about a woman named Julia. It was about all the stolen moments, all the nights he came home late while I naively believed his empty excuses. It was about the systemic lie we built together, where I was merely a decorative object in his life. My initial anger quickly turned into biting sarcasm. I laughed alone, a bitter laugh echoing in the empty walls of my kitchen. 25 years of marriage reduced to a few passionate messages, I thought. What a cruel joke destiny played, but something within me began to awaken. I would no longer be the submissive woman accepting crumbs of love. Every word in that message that once shattered me now prepared me for a personal revolution. I would not just be the betrayed wife, I would be the protagonist of my own reconstruction story. The tears that initially paralyzed me were replaced by an almost palpable determination. I realized that Carlos was losing much more than I was in that moment. He was losing a resilient woman, strong enough to rise from her own ashes. My pain would become fuel. Each tear would be a step toward my freedom. I would no longer be a hostage of social expectations, or a marriage that slowly suffocated me. I was about to discover a version of myself I didn't even know existed. The storm within me subsided. In place of fragility, a woman willing to rewrite her own narrative emerged. Carlos could have chosen to leave, but I would choose to live, and I would live intensely. I began to discreetly investigate Carlos and Julia's lives, morphing into an amateur detective driven by pain and the need for understanding. Every detail I uncovered was like a piece of a morbid puzzle consuming me from within. Sometimes, I followed his digital trails on social media. Other times, I quietly spoke with mutual acquaintances, searching for crumbs of the truth. My routine, fragmented. During the day, I maintained the facade of a dedicated mother, preparing snacks for the kids, helping with homework, pretending everything was normal. At night, when everyone was asleep, my investigative side emerged. Spreadsheets, screenshots of conversations, location tracking, everything became evidence of a betrayal that seemed larger with each discovery. The weight of the secret consumed me. How could I balance emotional fragility with the need to protect my children? Every forced smile was a heavy mask. Each embrace of my children carried the burden of a silent lie. Guilt gnawed at me for not being fully present, torn between the pain of betrayal and maternal responsibility. My self-esteem plummeted with every revelation. I obsessively questioned what was lacking in me. Why wasn't I enough? Julia represented everything I wasn't. Young, free, unencumbered. While I had devoted myself wholly to the family, she had captured my husband's heart with seemingly effortless ease. But something interesting began to happen. Each investigation, every discovery that initially hurt me, gradually transformed into fuel for my reconstruction. The desperate crying was replaced by strategic anger. I would no longer be the passive victim, but the protagonist of my own story. I realized that my quest for answers was, in fact, a journey of self-discovery. Every piece of evidence of Carlos's betrayal revealed parts of myself I had abandoned over the years. My investigation was less about him and more about my own rediscovery. The pressure to maintain the appearance of a happy family was exhausting. Forced smiles at family gatherings, superficial conversations to avoid conflict. But that weight began to dissipate. Every document, every intercepted message not only provided proof of betrayal, but also ammunition for my liberation. The universe conspired for me to understand. My life would not end in the pain of betrayal. It would merely be the prologue to a much more powerful story where I would be the true protagonist. Carlos could have chosen to leave, but I would choose to be reborn. My body trembled as I mentally organized the evidence of betrayal. I decided to confront Carlos without leaving room for his usual manipulations. When I found him at home, my voice came out differently, no longer tearful, but sharp as a blade. "Sit here," I ordered, spreading the phone messages across the table. My fixed gaze on him revealed a strength I didn't even know I possessed. Carlos tried to stutter excuses, but I interrupted. "I don't want explanations. I want the truth." Every word I spoke was calculated. I detailed each piece of evidence, with surgical precision, destroying his attempts to minimize the betrayal. 25 years thrown away for what? A midlife crush? I questioned, my sarcasm cutting through the air. Carlos lowered his head, unable to sustain my gaze. I realized that my transformation frightened him more than any accusation. I was no longer the submissive wife he once knew. I was a woman who had discovered her own power. "It's over," I declared, not as a plea, but as a definitive sentence. My voice did not tremble. My eyes did not cry. I was definitively closing one cycle and preparing for another. The confrontation lasted. Little time, but was definitive. Each second represented my liberation. Carlos would no longer be the center of my existence. I would be. When he left that room, I understood that I had won the first battle. Not against Carlos, but with myself. My dignity remained intact. My soul was rebuilt. The betrayal that could have destroyed me would now be the fuel for my reconstruction. After discovering the betrayal, my life turned into a labyrinth of tearing emotions. Carlos had definitively moved in with Julia, leaving me alone with our 3 children and a sea of responsibilities that seemed to drown me with each passing moment. The first months were a true survival challenge. Bills piled up like an invisible army ready to defeat me. My job as a secretary barely covered the basic expenses, and every cent became a daily battle. The alimony Carlos was supposed to pay arrived late, making me tremble with anxiety. Loneliness settled in as an unrelenting companion. The nights were long and silent, filled only with the occasional sound of my children sleeping. Every room in the house seemed to hold memories of a marriage that was now just a faded photograph. As if the pain of betrayal wasn't enough, the burden of being both father and mother weighed heavily. My children sensed the change. I could see in their eyes a mixture of sadness and confusion. Rafael, the oldest, tried to take on a protective role that shouldn't have been his. Marina, the youngest, constantly asked when her dad would return, and Pedro, somewhere in between, remained silent, a quietness that scared me more than any word. The irony of the situation consumed me. 25 years dedicated to a man who traded me for a younger woman as if I were a discarded object. How many times had I silenced myself? How many times did I remain quiet to keep the peace? Anger began to transform into fuel. I started to realize that my initial fragility could transform into strength. Each bill I paid, every lunch I prepared, every homework task I helped with was a small revolution. I would no longer be the submissive, Anna, invisible. I would be the Anna rising from her own ashes. I sought help, initially in support groups for betrayed women, then in therapy. Each session felt like peeling off a mask that concealed my true essence. I discovered that my story would not end with betrayal, but would begin there. The universe seemed to conspire to show me that I was so much more than Carlos's wife. I started taking night classes, investing in my professional development. My long-delayed dream of studying business was finally taking shape. The loneliness that once paralyzed me now empowered me. Every night alone became an opportunity for growth and rediscovery. I realized that Carlos did not define me. I was my own story, my own protagonist. The battle was just beginning, but I was ready, no longer as a victim, but as a warrior. My life would be rebuilt, not by Carlos, not by Julia, but by me. Custody court would be my last battlefield against Carlos. The forum's walls seemed to watch me, silent witnesses to a story of betrayal and resilience. My heart raced, but no longer out of fear. Now it was out of determination. When I stood up to speak, my voice was different. It was no longer the whisper of a broken woman, but the roar of someone who had discovered her true strength. I looked directly at Carlos, who tried to maintain a neutral stance, but couldn't hide his discomfort. 25 years of marriage summarized by a betrayal, I said, with a cutting sarcasm that froze the atmosphere. I'm not here for revenge, but for the protection of our children. Each word was calculated, every breath an act of courage. I exposed not only the proof of infidelity, but also the emotional impact the betrayal had on our children. Rafael, Marina, and Pedro, my true legacy, deserved so much more than crumbs of love. The judge observed me closely. I realized I was no longer the invisible woman Carlos had left behind. I was a warrior, built by pain, tempered by resilience. When I presented documents demonstrating my ability to support and care for the children, my voice did not tremble. I outlined my study plans, my new job, my determination to rebuild our life without relying on him. Carlos attempted to interrupt me several times, but each attempt was met with a look that silenced him instantly. It wasn't tears of fragility that accompanied me, but a glint of transformation. I didn't come here to be victimized, I declared. I came to ensure our children have the dignity you, Carlos, abandoned along with our family. The room breathed my new energy. It was no longer about what Carlos had done, but about who I was becoming. Each word was an act of liberation, every argument a layer of strength being built. When I finally sat down, I knew something had changed definitively. I was no longer the Anna from before, submissive, invisible, compliant. I was a woman who transformed her pain into power, her betrayal into fuel for a new beginning. The hearing would be just another chapter, not the end of my story, but a turning point toward my true journey of redefinition. The custody hearing meant so much more to me than just a simple legal formality. It was the moment of my true liberation. Sitting in that cold, impersonal room, I realized that my battle wouldn't be waged merely against Carlos, but primarily for myself. The favorable decision for my custody came as an unexpected relief. Each word from the judge echoed as confirmation. I was capable. I was strong. I would not be reduced to a statistic of the betrayed woman, but would rise as an example of resilience. The eyes of my children sparkled with a mix of hope and expectation. Rafael, always so mature, held my hand with a strength that surprised me. Marina smiled discreetly, as if that moment meant the reconstruction of our family. Pedro, always more introspective, maintained a watchful gaze that deeply moved me. The judicial victory was just the first step. I knew that the true journey of recovery would be rebuilding our lives, rewriting our story without the shadow of Carlos. Every cent I would receive in alimony would be transformed into opportunity. Every moment would be a chance for growth. My new reality brought immense challenges. Alone, I would have to manage the house, care for the children, work, and reinvent myself. The weight seemed tremendous, but something within me had changed. I no longer saw myself as a victim, but as the architect of my own destiny. The financial independence I had always dreamed of began to sprout. My night classes in business were no longer just a distant dream, but a concrete plan for transformation. Each studied page represented a brick in the construction of my new identity. The nights that were once filled with tears and doubts now became moments of planning and hope. I prepared breakfast for the kids with a smile that was no longer forced, but genuine. My pain was being transformed into fuel for a new beginning. Carlos might have chosen to leave, but I would choose to live, and I would live intensely, unchained, unafraid. The betrayal that once seemed an end was now just a blank chapter, ready to be written by my own hands. The judicial battle was just the beginning. My true victory would be waking up every day and choosing to be happy, regardless of the circumstances. And that choice, I would make every day, with the strength of a woman who learned that her story does not end in pain, but is rewritten by courage. Months after the divorce, my world finally found a new balance. The job I secured at the local logistics company was not just a source of income, but a stronghold for personal reconstruction. Every spreadsheet I organized, every report I prepared represented more than numbers. They were pieces of my autonomy being sewn together. The children, once lost in the confusion of the separation, now breathed a different peace. Rafael, my oldest son, began to look at me with a mixture of admiration and complicity. Marina no longer asked anguished questions about her father's whereabouts, and Pedro finally smiled with more ease. The house, which had been a territory of painful memories, transformed into our sanctuary of rebirth. Every room held stories no longer of pain, but of resilience. Pictures of us began to replace the dusty portraits of a marriage that no longer existed. I discovered that true freedom did not lie in escaping Carlos, but in finding myself again. The 55 years I carried were not a burden, but a wealth of experience. Every wrinkle on my face told a story of overcoming, every gray hair a trophy from battles won. Julia, the woman who once seemed to shatter me, was now just a faded figure on my horizon. Carlos? He had become almost a distant memory, someone who passed through my life without defining me. The betrayal that once felt like an insurmountable abyss was now merely a scar that made me stronger. I began to realize that my story would not be told from the perspective of the abandoned wife, but from the woman who was reborn. Every morning was a new blank page, every decision, an act of courage. The financial independence I gained was not just about money, but about the power of choice. The friends who accompanied me on this journey, a few church friends, my workmates, witnessed my transformation. I was no longer the fragile woman, but a woman choosing her own path, a path paved not with tears, but with determination. Life taught me that true love begins when we learn to love ourselves. Carlos might have left me, but I never abandoned myself, and that made all the difference. I reflected on my journey and realized that pain did not define me, but transformed me. Every tear shed was a step toward my liberation. Carlos's betrayal was not my end, but my new beginning. I discovered that true strength lies not in perfection, but in reinvention. Today, I smile not because of the wound, but because of the scar that made me more resilient and free.